All right, hello, welcome back. Today we're going to begin our fourth unit in this class on World War I with a lesson that discusses how the war begins. We're going to discuss the four main causes of World War I, as well as discuss the America's stance on the war when it begins. So, as with every unit, we're going to begin with a map of how things look. This map illustrates the situation in 1918. Before we go any further, I should note that World War I takes place officially between 1914 and 1919. The reason why I say the officially is because the actual warfare, takes place between 1914 and 1918. But that last year is more reserved for the writing of the treaty that formally ends the war. So here in 1918, this is towards the end of the war, but this map illustrates the alliance system that can be seen during the latter part of the war. So if you look at the key of this map, you can see that purple countries are countries that are considered to be the Allied powers. The United States will eventually end up entering the war on this side. So the main Allied powers are France, Great Britain, and Russia. And you can see there's other Allied powers as well, but they play more of a peripheral role in the war. And on the other side were the Central Powers. You can see that the Central Powers are in orange. Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire make up the Central Powers. You can consider Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire to be the main combatants on that side. Here I included a table just so that you can easily organize this information in your head. The Allied powers, Great Britain, France, Russia, and Italy from 1915 to 1918, as well as the United States from 1917 to 1918. Now on the other side, you have Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy in 1914, the Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria. Italy is an interesting case because Italy initially ends up making a defensive alliance with Austria-Hungary and Germany. But when Germany and Austria-Hungary start this war, because Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia first, we'll get there. Italy says, hold on a second. We were under the impression this was a defensive alliance, that we were going to get involved on your side only if you were attacked. We didn't agree to be on your side if you go on the offensive, if you're the one declaring war. And so Italy ends up backing out of that alliance and joining the Allied powers instead in 1915. So let's move on to the four main causes of World War I. When I say main causes, I want you to remember main being an acronym for the four causes of this war. The first being militarism, the second being alliances, the third being imperialism, and the fourth being nationalism. Let's talk about each one individually, beginning with imperialism. So how did imperialism contribute to the start of World War I? Well, imperialism, as you are already aware, because we had spent a whole unit talking about imperialism right before the semester had ended. Imperialism is this process by which a country expands its influence, usually globally, through diplomatic relations, or more often, military force. So a country like Great Britain, the United States, Belgium, France, these are countries that go to the continent of Africa, end up going to Asia, going to the Caribbean, and they plant their flag in another country and they say, you are now our colony. You are part of our empire, and that's kind of the root word of imperial imperialism. So these countries are desiring to create a global empire. Why? Well, yeah, part of it is to demonstrate strength, but the main reason why you had European powers as well as the United States sought to create an empire was because they were seeking raw materials needed for manufacturing as well as new markets to sell their goods. And so let's start first with the raw materials part. So, as you're aware, at the end of the 1800s and the beginning of the 1900s, America, as well as European powers, began shifting away from an agricultural economy, so an economy based on farming, and towards an economy that was based on industry. So they were building cities and factories, and they would use these factories to manufacture products. But in order to manufacture products, you need to have raw materials to build products. And so, to give you an example, or some examples of raw materials, you're talking lumber, oil, coal, rubber. These are all basic natural resources, but they're used to create more complex things. So Europeans were seeking those raw materials in order to kind of fuel their factories and create or manufacture more complex goods. And then furthermore, European powers, as well as the United States, were just looking for new markets to sell those goods to. So it's great if you're building a bunch of new stuff, if you're creating, manufacturing new goods, but you need people to buy your goods. And so you have European powers who would colonize countries around the world and then furthermore sell products to those consumers in those nations. So think about it. You had European countries were invading other countries, colonizing other countries, and then exploiting them or taking advantage of them for their resources, sending those resources back home to Europe, manufacturing goods using another country's raw materials, resources, and then selling those goods back to that country. Kind of messed up when you think about it. It's clear exploitation of those people. So here you can see imperialism illustrated, where you have Spain, France, Belgium, Holland, Great Britain, Germany, Italy, Portugal. They're all competing for resources in the continent of Africa. They're all kind of tugging at Africa. They want Africa to themselves because all of these countries are trying to carve up the African map and stake their claim to the raw materials in African countries. So there was a desire for stronger militaries to protect overseas holdings. So this leads us to our second cause of World War I, which was militarism. So why did European countries start an arms race? Arms being another word for weapons. So not only were they building up their armies to protect, or their militaries to protect their overseas colonies, but furthermore, they were competing with each other within Europe. So take Germany. Germany had Europe's strongest standing army at the time. So if you are France, for example, and you see that Germany has a very powerful standing army, what you're going to be feeling is insecurity, vulnerability, weakness. And so what you are going to do is you're going to invest in your military. You're going to build more ships, build more airplanes, manufacture more weapons so that you can compete with the German army. And if you're the German army, you see that France is investing a lot in their military. You're going to invest even more in your military. You're going to build more tanks, more submarines, more airplanes, more guns. And then if you're France, you're now suddenly feeling vulnerable again, so you end up investing in more in your military. So militarism is not only this glorification of the military, but furthermore building stronger and stronger militaries, and then furthermore being prepared to use it if necessary. And so all of these European countries see their neighbors building up their militaries, and they felt compelled to do so themselves. So everybody's trying to throw more money at the military, become a stronger and stronger nation. So this arms race did lead to the design of many technological innovations, such as long-range artillery being large caliber guns, and then you also have machine guns. I think everybody knows what a machine gun is, airplanes, etc. Let's move on to our next cause of World War I. So you have the alliance system was the third cause. So we've talked about militarism, we've talked about imperialism, now we have alliances. The alliance system sounds great in theory, that you want to have friends, you want to have allies that are going to have your back in case you are attacked. However, this is what ended up making World War I a truly global affair instead of the more regional conflict that it probably should have remained. So the more weapons and troops each country had amassed due to militarism, the more insecurity each one felt. So each country searched for allies on which it could depend if war started. But the alliance system effectively divided Europe into two armed camps, the Allies and the Central Powers. And war between any two countries would then threaten war among them all. So you can see this being depicted in this political cartoon. Here you have Serbia, little Serbia, and being attacked by Austria-Hungary. And Austria-Hungary is saying, if you make a move out, but Serbia is in an alliance with Russia, and you can see I've made them the same color. So Russia has an alliance with Serbia. So Russia comes to the rescue of little Serbia, and Russia says that if you hit that little feller out, but then Germany comes to the defense of Austria-Hungary because they're both central powers, and Germany ends up putting a hand on Russia and says, if you strike my friend out, and that leaves France, which is allied with Russia, to say that if you hit him out, and so you have all of these countries are trying to come to the defense of their allies. What probably should have remained just an isolated conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia ended up blowing up into a global affair that involved many, many different countries. And then the last main cause of World War I was nationalism. Now, this can be a confusing word. So, nationalism is this excessive pride or patriotism in one's country, but it can also be when a group of people begin to see themselves as members of a common group rather than individuals. And so, usually you have individuals start to associate with people that have similar language, similar heritage, similar culture, and this excites people of an ethnic group into believing that they should have their own independent country. And so maybe I should give you a more concrete example. Here I put an image of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now, this is an empire that no longer exists. You have a country of Austria, you have a country of Hungary, but you don't have the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But this empire that existed prior to World War I and during World War I had actually included many, many different ethnic or cultural groups. You can see this on the map where you have Romanians over in southeast Hungary, you have Ukrainians in northeast Austria-Hungary, Poles, Slovaks, Czechs, Italians, Slovenians, Croatians, Serbs, and all of these different ethnic groups began to feel a lot of pride in their culture, and they began to believe that they should have their own independent country, which apart from Austria-Hungary. You had Ukrainians, for example, they didn't feel any attachment to the Empire of Austria-Hungary. They didn't consider themselves to be Austro-Hungarian. They considered themselves to be Ukrainian. And so Ukrainians wanted a Ukraine. You had Poles wanted a Poland. You had Slovenians wanted a Slovenia. Croatians wanted a Croatia, and so on and so forth. All of these ethnic groups began to feel this excessive pride in their own culture. They wanted to be independent from their oppressor being Austria-Hungary. So Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Russia all contained nationalist groups which sought independence and harbored festering or boiling resentments within those countries. And that really leads to the catalyst of World War I. The catalyst is an event that sparks something much larger. And so that spark that lights the powder keg that is World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now, the Archduke is a position that is the heir to the throne of an empire. So in this case, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, I want you to think of him like the Prince of Austria-Hungary. He is next in line to the throne. He is the son of the emperor, and he would become the emperor once his father dies. So a very, very important person, arguably second most important person in all of Austria-Hungary. Well, you had a young assassin. When I say young, I'm talking about 18, 19 years old. Gavrilo Princip was only about 1 to 2 years older than all of you. This young man ends up assassinating the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. Gavrilo Princip was an assassin from I should say he was a Serbian assassin. He was a Serbian nationalist. What he wanted was for the Serbs living in Austria-Hungary to be part of Serbia. So he wanted the country or the empire of Austria-Hungary to give up this land that Serbs, ethnic Serbs, lived in, and then turn this land over to Serbia so that Serbs can be part of the Serbian country that already existed. Well, Gavrilo Princip ends up taking actions into his own hands and kills the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. Now, Austria-Hungary had a political alliance with Germany. Serbia had ethnic or cultural ties to Russia, which then brings Germany and Russia into the conflict. So how does World War I become a global war? Well, Austria-Hungary suspects that the Serbian government is behind the assassination. They couldn't possibly believe that Gavrilo Princip had acted on his own. So they believe that the Serbian government had put him up to it. So the Austro-Hungarian leaders wanted to attack Serbia, but they feared that Russia was going to intervene if they did so. So because Russia, they had already started mobilizing the army in support of their Serbian ally. And you can see that in this picture. This is the Russian military mobilizing. To mobilize the army means to assemble troops and supplies in preparation for war. Now, mobilization is considered an act of war in and of itself. So, Austria-Hungary turns to its ally, Germany, and says that if Russia intervenes on Serbia's behalf, will you have our back? And Germany grants a blank check to Austria-Hungary, meaning that Germany says to Austria-Hungary, no matter what you do, we've got your back. And so this emboldens Austria-Hungary to declare war on Serbia. And because Austria-Hungary declared war on Russia's ally, Russia ends up declaring war on Austria-Hungary. So now we've got 3 countries at war. Germany, in fulfilling its duties, or its alliance duties to Austria-Hungary, declares war on Russia. So now we've got 4 countries that are at war. And at this point, you have France, which was allied with Russia, declares war on Germany and Austria-Hungary. So here, let me go back to the map one more time. So you have France is allied with Russia, and since Russia is at war with Germany and Austria-Hungary, France says, well, I guess we're getting involved too. We're going to declare war on Germany and Austria-Hungary. So now you've got 5 countries that are at war. Well, Germany, once France enters the war, they fear getting bogged down in a 2-front war. And what that means, what a front of war is, it's kind of a region in which the military of one country meets the military of another country. So you would assume that Germany and Russia, the front of that war would be kind of around this region right here, because this is where Germany meets Austria. So you'd have the Russian military and the German military would probably meet in this area right here. Germany is afraid that if France enters the war, that they're going to have half of their army fighting on the Western Front and half of their army fighting on the Eastern Front. So this would effectively split the German military in half, where half of the military is fighting France, half of the military is fighting Russia, and it dilutes or minimizes the effectiveness of the German military. So Germany decides that they're going to be sly and they're going to invade France before France can fully mobilize and get ready for war. So it's going to be this quick strike. They're going to attack France before France even knows what hits them. And this is what was called the Schlieffen Plan, where Germany was going to invade France through neutral Belgium. You can see on this map, neutral nations are in beige. Belgium, the country, is in beige. Belgium is not allied with France or Germany or Austria. Belgium wants to remain neutral, but Germany invades a neutral nation to get to France on the other side. It was going to be like a sneak attack where they, because France is expecting them to come right here, to attack right here where France meets Germany. Germany said, we're going to get them from behind. We're going to sneak behind them, and then we're going to attack where they aren't expecting it. It's called the Schlieffen Plan. So the intention was to achieve quick victory. However, strategically, this is probably a pretty poor move in hindsight, because this had invoked a treaty that Great Britain had with Belgium. Great Britain said that if Germany or any other country invades neutral Belgium, that Great Britain was going to intervene in the war. And Germany invades neutral Belgium, so then Great Britain says, well, I guess we're going to war too. And Great Britain ends up joining the war on the side of Russia, Serbia, France, as an allied power. So how did the war progress in the first few months? Well, after the initial success of that Belgium invasion, the German offense had stalled. So there was a quick attack, they gained a lot of ground, but then they just kind of stopped progressing any further. So the Germans, not wanting to lose any ground that they had gained, had actually established defensive trenches that had stretched all the way from the North Sea, the English Channel here, all the way down to neutral Switzerland. And it was not just one trench, rather, it was just thousands of different smaller trenches that stretched all the way through hundreds of miles from all across France. So this was known as the Western Front of the war. So trench warfare, as you can see here, trench warfare was actually responsible for this 4-year stalemate of the war, where neither side, neither the Allies nor the Central Powers, were really gaining all that much ground, because you might gain a few hundred yards, but that wasn't much of anything, and then your opponent would beat you back a few hundred yards after that. So you had two sides that were just kind of bogged down in trenches, and the war became especially bloody because they were just kind of stuck there. They weren't advancing any forward, but they didn't want to retreat backwards into their respective countries. So new technologies like the machine gun, poisonous gas, mustard gas, and powerful artillery had then led to over 1 million deaths in 1914 alone. So it was a very bloody war. So while this is all going on, let's go to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean in our country. So what was America's stance on the war? President Wilson, this is President Woodrow Wilson, he holds this belief that the United States should remain out of this conflict, that these are European affairs. The United States is way over here, they're way over there. Why should we get involved in their problems? And so he took on a policy of neutrality. And he's referencing this London Declaration of 1909. This was signed by Great Britain, the United States, Germany, and other nations as well. But in this London Declaration, neutrality was defined. So what does it mean to be a neutral nation? Well, according to the law here, it says that a nation is neutral so long as it does not, 1, shelter warships in ports. So as long as the United States is not sheltering or protecting British warships, French warships, Russian warships, German warships in our American ports, we're neutral. 2, as long as it does not train troops. So if the United States starts training British troops, Russian troops, German troops, or even start training our own troops to mobilize for war, then we would then suddenly be, we would no longer be considered neutral. But as long as we don't do that, we're neutral. And then the third stipulation is that a country is neutral when it does not sell weapons and munitions, these are kind of like war materials, to either side. But private companies and banks, however, could still make loans and sell weapons to combatant nations. So many Americans, they sided with Woodrow Wilson on this. They didn't want to get involved in a European war. Not only did they think that these affairs were far removed, literally far removed, from the United States, but it was also unclear on which side the United States should intervene. So we had British immigrants in this country. We had French immigrants, Italian immigrants, German immigrants, and all of these different immigrants had still identified with their home countries. Woodrow Wilson tried really hard to combat this. He tried to unify the nation so that Europe's problems did not become our problems. We're German immigrants, we're fighting with British immigrants, and Woodrow Wilson really wanted to emphasize that we are all Americans, and whether you are a British American, French American, German American, Italian American, you are an American first. And however, even though that's what is said and how people actually feel are two different things. And you had many immigrants still felt an attachment to their home country. From 1914 to 1916, U.S. companies, private companies, so this is not the government, these are privately held companies, had engaged in trade with the Allied powers as well as the Central Powers. And the trade in munitions ended up increasing from $40 million in 1914 all the way to $1.3 billion in 1916. So we're making a lot of money off of this European war in this country. Our private companies are building weapons, are building munitions, and then selling them to these countries that are at war. So we're profiting off of their war. Likewise, private banks had lent $27 million to the Central Powers and $2.2 billion to the Allies. So when banks loan money, they don't just loan the money and say, all right, pay us back when the war's over. Rather, they loan the money and they say, oh, and you also have to give us interest. That for every $100 we loan you, you have to pay us $110 back, for example. So we're making money off of this European war. So World War I kind of helped the United States out of an economic slump that we were dealing with. So here you can see this political cartoon. You have Uncle Sam, which is America personified in political cartoons. He's walking around, he's got this poster that says, peace on earth and goodwill toward men. Which is beautiful. He's saying that the United States, it believes in peace. The United States believes in goodwill towards all. And then he walks in the other direction, and you see the backside of this poster saying, war ammunition for sale, orders filled promptly. So it's kind of an advertisement on the back saying that, well, yeah, we want peace, but we'll be willing to sell you war weapons. We'd be willing to sell you munitions and profit off of your bloodshed. So there is a degree of hypocrisy here where we're saying that we want peace, we're saying that we want goodwill towards all, but then our private companies here in this country were then profiting off of the war while it was going on. All right, that's all I have for you today. In our next lecture, we're going to discuss how America's policy of neutrality was threatened and what war was like on the home front, which means how was American life at home while the war was going on overseas. All right, see you next time.